I'm Mark 36 male. I live a life of structure and discipline, a necessity for an army sergeant who spends months away from home. My world revolves around my wife, Jessica, and our two kids, Mia and Ben, who live in the house we built together just outside Fort Bragg. This story is about how the home I fought to protect was almost sold out from under me by the person I trusted to keep it safe. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The pre-dawn air was cool and heavy with the scent of pine and wet earth. It was a smell I'd always associated with home, a comforting anchor in the whirlwind of my life. That morning, however, it felt different, tinged with the familiar bitterness of departure. My duffel bags were packed and lined up by the front door like silent, green soldiers of their own, waiting for their command. It was my fourth deployment in 12 years. This time, a 9-month tour in a dusty, volatile corner of the world that felt a million miles away from the North Carolina suburbs. Jessica stood in the hallway, her arms wrapped around herself, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the kitchen light. She had that look on her face, the one I knew so well. It was a carefully constructed mask of supportive sorrow, a look she'd perfected over the years. Her eyes were sad, but there was a distance in them, a glaze that I'd started to notice more and more in the months leading up to this day. I'd chalked it up to pre-deployment stress. It's hard on the spouses, harder in many ways. They're left to fight the battles of the home front alone. The broken water heater, the parent-teacher conferences, the fevers in the middle of the night. "You'll be safe, right?" she asked, her voice a practiced whisper. It was the same question she asked every time, a part of our ritual. "I'm always safe, Jess," I replied, pulling her into a hug. She felt stiff in my arms, not melting into me the way she used to. "I've got the best guys watching my back, you just worry about you and the kids." I looked over her shoulder towards the living room, where Mia, our 9-year-old daughter, was pretending to be asleep on the couch. Her little brow was furrowed with worry. Ben, our 6-year-old son, was a lump under a blanket, his quiet snores the only sound of true peace in the house. This was the hardest part, leaving them. They were my why, the reason I endured the sand, the heat, and the constant, low-grade hum of danger. I knelt beside Mia and gently brushed the hair from her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open. "Daddy, do you have to go?" "Just for a little while, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't show. "I'll be back before you know it. You be a good girl for mommy, okay? Help her with your brother." She nodded, her lower lip trembling. I handed her the worn teddy bear I'd given her on my first deployment. She called him Sergeant Patches. He was her guardian when I couldn't be. Jessica had prepared my favorite breakfast, pancakes and bacon, but the food sat heavy in my stomach. The conversation was stilted, filled with practicalities. "The lawn care service is paid through the summer," she said, staring into her coffee cup. "I put the number for the plumber on the fridge just in case that sink starts acting up again." "Good, that's good," I said. "And you have all the power of attorney paperwork, right? The access codes for the joint accounts are in the safe." She nodded. "I know, Mark, we've been through this before." There was an edge to her voice, a flicker of irritation that surprised me. I let it go. We were both on edge. My best friend Leo, another sergeant in my unit, was picking me up. The sound of his truck pulling into the driveway was my cue. Time was up. The final goodbye was a blur of tight hugs and whispered "I love yous." I held Jessica for a moment longer, searching her eyes for a connection, for the woman I'd married. I saw a flicker of something. Was it guilt? Regret? I couldn't be sure. Then it was gone, replaced by the same sad, distant smile. "Right every chance you get," she said. "You know I will," I promised. As Leo and I drove towards the base, the familiar rhythm of military life started to take over, pushing the ache of farewell into a box in the back of my mind. Leo, ever perceptive, glanced over at me. "Everything okay, man?" he asked. "You seem off." "Just the usual," I lied. "Saying goodbye never gets easier." He nodded, accepting the answer. "Tell me about it. My wife cried for an hour straight. I'm pretty sure our dog is depressed." I forced a smile, but a cold knot of unease was tightening in my gut. Something felt fundamentally different this time. In the past, Jessica's sadness had been palpable, a shared weight. This time, it felt like I was the only one carrying it. Her sadness felt performed, as if she were playing the part of the grieving military wife while her mind was already somewhere else. I tried to shake it off. I was being paranoid, letting the stress get to me. She was strong, independent, and she was holding our family together. I had to trust her. That trust was the bedrock of our entire life, the foundation that allowed me to do my job thousands of miles away. It was a trust I believed was absolute, unbreakable. In the coming weeks, I would learn just how wrong I was, and how that sacred foundation was nothing more than sand, about to be washed away by a tide of betrayal I never saw coming. The memory of that morning, her distant eyes and stiff embrace, would later replay in my mind not as a sad farewell, but as the chilling prologue to the demolition of my entire world. The first few weeks of deployment were a familiar grind. The world shrank to the size of our forward operating base, a patch of beige dust and concrete surrounded by blast walls. Days were long, hot, and monotonous, punctuated by the adrenaline of patrols. Nights were for cleaning weapons, writing emails, and trying to feel connected to a world that was moving on without you. My communication with Jessica was regular at first. We had our scheduled video calls, her face pixelated and delayed on my laptop screen. The kids would pop into the frame, shouting "Hi, Daddy," and showing me their latest drawings or a missing tooth. Ben would tell me about his t-ball games, and Mia would read a page from a book she was proud of. They were the bright spots, the moments of pure, unfiltered love that fueled me. Jessica, however, remained distant. She'd answer my questions with short, vague responses. "How are things at home?" "Fine." "How are the finances?" "Everything's handled." "How are you really?" "Tired." "It's a lot, Mark." I tried to be understanding. I sent her extra money for a spa day, arranged for flowers to be delivered. I told her to hire a babysitter and go out with her friends. "You deserve a break," I'd say. "Don't worry about the cost." She'd thank me, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. The calls started getting shorter. Sometimes she'd miss our scheduled time, texting me hours later with an excuse. "Sorry, Ben had a fever," or "the internet is down." About 2 months in, Leo and I were sitting in the makeshift rec room, a stuffy tent with a few plastic chairs and a slow internet connection. It was our designated downtime. While most of the guys were playing games or watching movies, I was scrolling through news from back home, trying to feel some semblance of normalcy. I'd checked the local weather, read the sports section of our hometown paper's website. It was a pathetic way to feel connected, but it was all I had. On a whim, I decided to look at real estate listings in our area. We talked about maybe buying a bigger place in a few years once I had put in for a promotion. It was a silly daydream, a way to pass the time. I typed our town's name into the search bar of a popular real estate website. I scrolled through the first few pages, looking at houses I couldn't afford, imagining Mia and Ben playing in big backyards. Then I saw it. The picture was unmistakable. It was a professional wide-angle shot taken on a perfect sunny day. The lawn was freshly mowed, the flower beds were mulched, and a welcoming wreath hung on the front door. It was my house, our house. My heart stopped. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, some kind of glitch. Maybe the website was using old photos from when we first bought the place 6 years ago. But the listing was new, posted just 3 days prior. The description read, "Charming 3-bedroom, 2-bath family home in a desirable neighborhood, motivated seller, priced to move quickly." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to shake. "Motivated seller." The words echoed in my head. I clicked through the photos. There was our living room, but my leather recliner was gone. The family photos on the mantel had been replaced with generic art prints. The kids' rooms were neat and depersonalized, their colorful drawings and posters removed from the walls. It was our house, but it had been staged, sterilized, stripped of our life. It looked like the home of a stranger. "Mark, you good?" Leo's voice cut through the fog. He was looking at me with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just turned the laptop screen towards him. His eyes widened as he recognized the house. "What the hell is this?" he breathed, leaning closer. He read the listing details, his expression shifting from confusion to pure rage on my behalf. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It was posted 3 days ago," I managed to say, my voice raspy. "Did you talk to Jessica about this? Did you guys decide to sell?" "No," I said, the word tasting like poison. "No, I never." My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. We were in financial trouble and she was too scared to tell me. No, I managed our finances meticulously. I had alerts set up for any large transactions. I'd seen nothing out of the ordinary. Our savings were healthy, our mortgage payments were on auto draft. There was no reason she would tell me about. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to call her. The call went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Jessica, leave a message." Her cheerful recorded voice was a cruel irony. I tried again. Voicemail. "I sent a text, call me now, it's an emergency." The minutes stretched into an eternity. Leo sat with me in silence, a steady, supportive presence. He didn't offer platitudes or try to explain it away. He knew. He saw the same thing I did, a profound betrayal. My phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "Can't talk right now, putting the kids to bed, is everything okay?" The casualness of her reply was like a physical blow. Why is our house for sale, Jessica? I typed, my thumbs trembling with rage. The reply came back almost instantly. It's a mistake. I was just looking at the site and must have clicked something. It's not real, don't worry. A mistake, you don't accidentally hire a professional photographer, stage a house, and write a detailed listing description. The lie was so blatant, so insulting, it took my breath away. She thought I was a fool. She thought because I was thousands of miles away, I was deaf, dumb, and blind. That was the moment the unease I'd been feeling for months crystallized into a terrifying certainty. The distant looks, the missed calls, the vague answers, it all snapped into focus. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. My wife was selling our home, the home where our children slept, behind my back. And if she was willing to do that, what else was she doing? I felt a chasm open up beneath me and I was falling. The man who left home 2 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who now understood that the real war wasn't being fought in the dust and heat around him. It was being fought for his home, his family, and his future, and he was the last to know. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I was trapped in a state of suspended animation, my body going through the motions of my duties while my mind was a maelstrom of anger, confusion, and fear. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. Every scenario I imagined was worse than the last. Was she leaving me? Was there someone else? Where was she planning on taking my children? Jessica stuck to her story with infuriating calmness. Over a series of terse text messages, she dismissed my panic as overreaction. I told you it was an error. I've already contacted the website to have it taken down, she wrote. You're stressed out over there. Please don't make this a bigger deal than it is. But the listing didn't come down. It stayed up, a digital monument to her lie. I checked it every hour, a form of self-torture. I even saw the status change to pending. Someone had made an offer. My house, our children's home, was being sold and I was powerless to stop it, or so I thought. I was a soldier. I was trained to analyze threats, gather intelligence, and act decisively. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, methodical anger. I couldn't let her do this. I needed proof and I needed leverage. The key, I realized, was the paperwork. To sell a house, especially one owned jointly, you need signatures, a lot of them, listing agreements, seller disclosures, purchase offers. She couldn't have done it without my signature. The immediate sickening thought was that she had forged it. Forgery was a crime, but proving it from halfway around the world felt impossible. Then I remembered something I had insisted on years ago, much to Jessica's annoyance. When we'd bought the house, our lawyer had suggested we set up a more secure system for legal documents, given the nature of my work. Deployments made it hard to sign things in person. We could have gone with a standard power of attorney, which I did grant her for everyday things like banking and medical decisions for the kids. But for major assets, the house, my life insurance, our investment accounts, I wanted an extra layer of security. I had worked with a specialized legal tech firm to create a system for digital authorizations. Any document pertaining to the sale of our property or the withdrawal of large sums from our joint investments required not just my written signature, but also a biometric verification, my thumbprint scanned through a secure app on my personal devices. When I was stateside, it was a simple press of my thumb on my phone. When deployed, I had to use a secure military terminal to provide the same verification. It was a cumbersome process, one Jessica had called paranoid and unnecessary. Do you really think I'm going to sell the house without telling you? She'd laughed at the time. The me. Maury was now laced with a bitter irony. That thumbprint was my ace in the hole. There was no way she could have faked it. A forged signature on a piece of paper might fool a realtor in a hurry, but it wouldn't get past the final closing process. The title company system would flag the missing digital verification. It was a digital tripwire she had no idea she was about to hit. My first call was not to Jessica, but to our bank. I used my secure line, identified myself with my military credentials, and spoke to the fraud department. I explained the situation calmly and professionally, telling them that I was currently deployed and had reason to believe my wife was attempting to liquidate our primary joint asset without my consent. I instructed them to freeze any transaction over $500 from our joint accounts and to place a high-security alert on our mortgage account. They were efficient and understanding. The first brick in my defensive wall was laid. My second step was to find a lawyer. I couldn't use our old family lawyer. He'd known Jessica for years and I couldn't risk any misplaced loyalties. Leo, who had been my shadow for the past day, knew a guy whose sister was a shark of a family law attorney back in North Carolina. Her name is Sarah Jenkins, he said, scribbling her number on a piece of paper. My buddy swears she's a pit bull. You need a pit bull right now. Getting a secure line to call the States during a reasonable hour was a challenge, but I managed it. I explained my situation to Sarah Jenkins. Her voice was calm, sharp, and devoid of sentimentalism. She didn't offer condolences, she asked for facts. Sergeant, you're telling me your wife has listed your marital home for sale without your knowledge or consent while you are on active deployment? She asked, her tone making it clear she understood the gravity of the situation. Yes, ma'am, and the listing is now marked as pending. Has she forged your signature on any documents that you know of? I believe she must have, starting with the listing agreement with the real estate agent, I said. But the final sale can't go through. I have a digital thumbprint verification system for all major legal documents. She can't have bypassed it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought I might have sounded crazy. Then Sarah said, "Well, Sergeant, you may have just saved your own house without even knowing it. That is an excellent piece of foresight. Most people aren't that prepared." Her validation was a huge relief. She continued, "Here's what we're going to do. First, I need you to grant me a limited power of attorney to act on your behalf. I'll send the secure forms to your military email address. You'll need to get them notarized by your commanding officer. Second, I will contact the real estate agency and the title company associated with the sale. I will inform them that they are proceeding with a fraudulent transaction, that any signature from you is a forgery, and that you, as co-owner of the property, do not consent to this sale. I will also inform them that your consent requires a specific digital verification which is impossible for them to have obtained." She laid out the plan with chilling efficiency. This will stop the sale dead in its tracks. They cannot legally proceed. The fallout will be messy, but the immediate threat will be neutralized. I felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. The feeling of helplessness began to recede, replaced by a sense of control. Jessica had underestimated me. She had counted on my physical absence creating a vacuum of power, but she had forgotten that my greatest strengths, preparation, strategy, and attention to detail were not bound by geography. She had forged my name, a simple scribble of ink on paper, but she couldn't forge my identity. My thumbprint, unique and unreplicable, was the silent witness to her betrayal, and it was about to blow her entire plan apart. With Sarah Jenkins on the case, I felt like I had an armored division on my side. She moved with breathtaking speed. Within hours of receiving my notarized power of attorney, she had fired off cease and desist letters to Jessica's real estate agent and the title company. The calls she received back, she later told me, were panicked. The agent was terrified of losing her license over facilitating a fraudulent sale. The title company immediately flagged the transaction and put an indefinite hold on the closing. The immediate threat of losing my home was gone. The pending sign on the online listing vanished, replaced by temporarily off-market. I could almost picture the frantic, furious phone call Jessica must have received. The first cracks in her scheme were showing. But stopping the sale wasn't enough. The betrayal went deeper than just the house. Why had she done it? The excuse of being overwhelmed and wanting a simpler life that she tried to sell me in a sari. Ease of angry texts felt hollow. There had to be more to it. People don't secretly sell their family home and prepare to uproot their children on a whim. This was a calculated, long-term plan. Sarah's next words to me were, "Mark, we need to know what she was running to and what she was running with. We need to follow the money." That was a language I understood. I had already locked down our main joint accounts, but Jessica was smart. She had been a bookkeeper before we had kids, and she handled our day-to-day bills. She knew her way around a balance sheet. It was possible she had been siphoning money for months, even years, into an account I knew nothing about. Under Sarah's legal guidance, we began a quiet but thorough financial investigation. As her legal representative, Sarah could subpoena records that I couldn't access. We started with our joint credit cards. I had always trusted Jessica to manage them, giving the statements only a cursory glance each month. Now, looking at them through a lens of suspicion, a pattern emerged. For the past year, there had been small, regular cashback transactions at grocery stores. $100 here, $200 there. Not enough to raise alarms, but when added up, it amounted to thousands of dollars in off-the-books cash. There were also purchases from stores I'd never heard her mention, and restaurant charges in towns an hour away, usually on days she'd told me she was just having a quiet day at home with the kids. The real breakthrough came when Sarah subpoenaed the bank records for our main joint checking account, not just the statements but the images of the cashed checks. We found a series of checks written over the last 6 months made out to a name I didn't recognize, Michael Thorne. They started small, just a few $100s, labeled household repairs or landscaping in the memo line, but they grew progressively larger. The most recent one, written just a week before my deployment, was for $5,000. The memo line was blank. "Who is Michael Thorne?" Sarah asked me during our next call. "I have no idea," I said, a cold dread washing over me. "I've never heard that name in my life." A quick background check, professionally and legally conducted by an investigator Sarah hired, painted a grim picture. Michael Thorne was a 40-year-old divorced contractor with a spotty work history and a recently leased apartment in a city 2 hours away. The first month's rent and security deposit for that apartment had been paid on the same day that $5,000 check had cleared our account. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about the money or the house, there was someone else. Jessica wasn't just leaving me, she was leaving me for him. She had been funding his life with our money. The simpler life she wanted was with another man in a new apartment paid for by me, the cash back from the grocery store, the dinners in other towns, it was all part of her double life. She had been building a new world for herself while I was preparing to go to war for hours. The rage I felt was so intense it was almost blinding. It was one thing to be deceived, but to be made a fool of, to have my hard-earned money used to build a nest for my wife and her lover, that was a different level of violation. I had spent years of my life in dangerous places, trusting that the home I was working to provide for was secure. All along, the biggest threat was sleeping in my bed. Sarah was my anchor, her voice pulling me back from the brink of pure emotion. "Mark, this is good for us," she said, her tone clinical. "This isn't just an affair, this is dissipation of marital assets. She has been using joint funds for non-marital purposes. In a divorce proceeding, a judge will take this very seriously. You have a clear, documented case." Divorce, the word hung in the air. It was a reality I hadn't allowed myself to fully contemplate until that moment. But now it was inevitable. The woman I had married was gone, replaced by a stranger who had plotted the destruction of our family. The investigation yielded more. We discovered a new credit card, opened in her name only, using our joint income information to secure a high credit limit. It was maxed out. Purchases included furniture, men's clothing, and a deposit on a private school in the town where Michael Thorne lived. She wasn't just planning to move, she was planning on enrolling my children in a new school, completely erasing me from their lives, all while I was away. She was trying to create a new family, a replacement family, funded by the one she was abandoning. The final and perhaps most painful discovery was a series of emails between Jessica and her sister. Sarah's investigator, through entirely legal means, found them on a shared family computer's backup cloud that I had access to as the primary account holder. In them, Jessica laid out her entire plan. She talked about how tired she was of being a military wife, how she felt she'd wasted her youth. She described me as dependable but boring and emotionally distant. She wrote about Michael in glowing terms, calling him her soulmate, and detailed her plan to sell the house while I was deployed, take the equity, and file for divorce from a position of financial strength, hoping I'd be too distracted and far away to fight back effectively. She was counting on me being a passive victim. She had no idea I was already mounting a counteroffensive. The evidence we had gathered was a devastating arsenal. Sarah had documented everything: the attempted fraudulent sale, the frozen bank accounts, the checks written to Michael Thorne, the credit card statements, the damning emails. We had a complete picture of Jessica's deception. Now it was time to move from defense to offense. Sarah and I worked together across a 7-hour time difference to craft a strategy we codenamed Operation Safe Harbor. The objective was twofold: protect my children and secure my financial future. The first phase was to formally separate our finances. Sarah filed an emergency petition with the family court, citing my active deployment and the evidence of financial misconduct. The petition asked a judge to grant me sole control over all marital assets until a formal divorce hearing could be held. This was an aggressive move, but given the circumstances, the attempted sale of the house and the dissipation of assets, Sarah was confident a judge would grant it. She was right. The emergency order was granted. Legally, Jessica was cut off. The joint accounts were now my accounts. The credit cards in her name that were tied to our joint income were frozen. The financial rug was pulled out from under her, and she didn't even know it yet. The second phase was about the children. This was the part that tore me apart. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of my barracks, picturing Mia and Ben in a strange apartment with a man I didn't know. A man my wife was funding with our family's money. It made me sick. I couldn't get home yet, my tour of duty was ironclad, but I could make sure they were safe. I had a long, difficult video call with my parents. They were retired and lived a few states away. I told them everything. My mother cried, and my father, a veteran himself, was silent with a kind of cold fury I knew well. They didn't hesitate. "We'll get on the road tomorrow," my dad said. What do you need us to do? Sarah drafted the legal paperwork. I was filing for temporary emergency custody of my children, citing their mother's unstable and deceptive behavior, her relationship with an unknown man, and her plan to abscond with them to another city. My parents would act as my designated guardians, providing a stable home for Mia and Ben until I could return. The final and most crucial phase of the plan was the timing. Jessica still believed her biggest problem was a glitch with the house sale. She had no idea I knew about Michael Thorne, the money, or her plans for the kids. She had been sending me texts that were a bizarre mix of feigned normalcy and simmering anger. The realtor is being a nightmare. I'm still trying to sort out that listing mistake, she wrote one day. Can you unfreeze the credit card? It got declined at the grocery store. It's embarrassing, she wrote the next. I gave vague, non-committal replies guided by Sarah. Let her think you're a distracted soldier too busy to deal with problems at home, Sarah advised. The less she knows, the more effective our next move will be. Our next move was the service. Sarah arranged for a process server to deliver the entire package at once. The divorce petition, the notice of the financial restraining order, and the emergency custody order granting temporary guardianship to my parents. The delivery was scheduled for a Friday morning, the day my parents were due to arrive in town. I coordinated with my parents via encrypted text messages. They would park down the street from the house. The process server would arrive at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Once the papers were served, my parents would walk to the door. The custody order gave them the legal authority to take the children. Sarah had also coordinated with the local police department to have an officer do a civil standby, just to ensure the exchange was peaceful and that Jessica didn't try anything foolish. Lying in my bunk the night before it was all set to happen, I felt a profound sense of sorrow. This wasn't a triumphant revenge, it was a rescue mission. I was using legal and financial weapons to save my children from a situation their mother had created. There was no joy in it, only a grim sense of duty. I thought about the life Jessica and I had built, the laughter, the late-night talks, the shared dreams. It felt like a lifetime ago, a memory belonging to someone else. That life was a casualty, collateral damage in a war I never w. I entered to fight. The next morning, I was on a satellite link with Sarah, my heart pounding in my chest. Leo stood by, a silent guard. It was 9:00 a.m. in North Carolina. He's there, Sarah said, her voice calm in my ear. The server is walking to the door. I held my breath. I could picture the scene perfectly. Jessica, probably in her yoga pants, sipping coffee, thinking her biggest problem was a stubborn realtor. Then the doorbell rings. She opens it to a stranger who hands her a thick manila envelope. The confusion on her face turning to shock, then to panic, then to rage as she reads the words. Petition for dissolution of marriage, emergency financial restraining order, ex parte order for temporary custody. Papers served, Sarah confirmed. My investigator is watching from across the street. She's not taking it well. A few minutes later, Sarah spoke again. Your parents are approaching the house. The police officer is with them. It's happening, Mark. I closed my eyes. I imagined Mia and Ben, confused and scared, being led out of their home by their grandparents. I imagined their tears. I was breaking their world apart to save it. It felt like a terrible contradiction. This was supposed to be a victory, the turning point where I took back control. But as I sat in that dusty tent thousands of miles away, listening to the dispassionate voice of my lawyer narrate the dismantling of my family, all I felt was the crushing weight of loss. Operation Safe Harbor was a success, but the cost was immense. The fallout from serving Jessica was immediate and explosive. My phone lit up with a barrage of texts and missed calls. The messages were a torrent of rage, disbelief, and threats. How could you do this to me? You can't take my children, I'm their mother. You'll pay for this, Mark. I'll tell everyone what a monster you are. I didn't respond. Sarah had been adamant, no direct communication, everything had to go through her. It was agonizing to read her accusations, her attempts to twist the narrative and paint me as the villain, but I followed my lawyer's advice. My parents were incredible. They handled the situation with quiet strength. They told me the kids were scared and confused at first, but once they were safely in my parents' car with their favorite toys and blankets, they calmed down. My mom said Mia just held onto her hand the entire drive back to their home while Ben fell asleep, exhausted from the emotional turmoil. They were safe. That was all that mattered. Jessica, cut off from our funds and without the kids, was cornered. Her lover, Michael Thorne, was suddenly far less appealing without the promise of a big payday from the house sale. Sarah's investigator reported that he cleared out of his apartment less than a week after the papers were served. He was a parasite and his host was no longer viable. Jessica was left completely alone in a house she couldn't sell, with accounts she couldn't access. Her grand plan had crumbled into dust. For the next 2 months, the battle was fought through lawyers. Jessica hired a cheap, aggressive attorney who tried to paint me as a controlling, manipulative husband using his military status to bully his client. It didn't work. Sarah was always 10 steps ahead, presenting our mountain of evidence, the emails, the bank statements, the forged signature on the listing agreement, with cold, irrefutable logic. Jessica's case was built on lies, and lies don't stand up to discovery. Then I got the news I'd been hoping for. A member of my unit had a family emergency and was being sent home early. My commanding officer, who was aware of my situation, made a decision. He was sending me home in his place. My tour was being cut short by 3 months. I told no one except my parents and Sarah. The element of surprise was my last remaining tactical advantage. I wanted to see my children, and I wanted to face Jessica on my own terms, on my own soil. The flight home was surreal. 24 hours earlier, I was in a desert, and now I was flying over the green, familiar landscape of America. I landed at a military airbase, not the civilian airport, and Leo's wife was there to pick me up. She gave me a hug and handed me the keys to her car. "Leo said to tell you to go raise some hell," she said with a grim smile. My first stop was my parents' house. The moment I walked through the door and Mia and Ben saw me, everything else melted away. They screamed "Daddy" and ran into my arms. I fell to my knees and held them, burying my face in their hair, breathing in the scent of home of them. Mia was crying and Ben was just holding on for dear life. In that moment, none of the betrayal or the anger mattered. All that mattered was that I had them back. My purpose, my why, was safe in my arms. After spending a day reconnecting with my kids, it was time for the final confrontation. I drove to my house, our house. It was strange seeing it again. The lawn was over. Grown, and a few newspapers were yellowing on the porch. It looked neglected, unloved. I used my old key. It still worked. I walked inside. The house was a mess. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink and clutter covered every surface. In the living room, our family photos were gone from the walls, stacked in a dusty pile in the corner. It was like the soul of the home had been ripped out. Jessica was in the kitchen on the phone, her back to me. Her voice was sharp, angry. "No, I don't have the money for your retainer. You have to get the judge to unfreeze my accounts." I closed the front door. The sound of it clicking shut made her whip around. When she saw me, all the color drained from her face. She looked gaunt, exhausted. The confident, scheming woman from the emails was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and desperate. Her phone clattered to the floor. "Mark," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. You're not supposed to be back." "Plans changed," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I walked slowly towards her, stopping on the other side of the kitchen island. I wanted that space between us. "We need to talk." "What are you doing here?" she stammered, recovering some of her nerve. "You can't just walk in here." "This is my house, Jessica," I said, my voice low and steady. "The one you tried to sell, the one my name is still on, the one my thumbprint protects. Remember the thumbprint? You called me paranoid." Her face flushed with anger and shame. "You turned my life upside down. You took my kids." "No," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "You did this. You took a man named Michael Thorne on vacations with our money. You paid his rent with the kids' college fund. You wrote checks to him, Jessica. I've seen them. Household repairs, was it?" I watched as the realization dawned on her face. I knew everything, not just about the house, but about the affair, the money, the entire sordid plan. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a look of utter defeat. "I was unhappy, Mark," she said weakly, her voice trembling. "You were never here." "That was my job," I shot back. "A job I did to give you this house, to give our kids everything they needed. While I was over there, worried about my team, worried about coming home to you, you were here, planning to steal it all. You weren't just unhappy, Jess. You were a thief. You tried to steal our children's home, their future, and their father all in one go." She sank into a kitchen chair, covering her face with her hands. She started to sob, but there were no real tears. It was the sound of self-pity, not remorse. "What do you want?" she finally asked, looking up at me, her eyes red. "I want you to sign the papers," I said coldly. "The divorce settlement Sarah sent your lawyer last week. You will walk away with nothing but your personal belongings and the car. You will get supervised visitation with the kids on my terms. You will cede all rights to this house and my pension. You will not get a single dime of alimony. You dissipated our assets, you committed fraud, and you engaged in parental alienation. If you fight it, I will take you to court, and I will show the judge every last email, every last check, and I will ruin you. But if you sign, you can walk away and start over with whatever it is you have left." She stared at me, her mouth agape. She knew she had no choice. I had her checkmated. The war was over. I had won. But standing there in the ruins of my home, looking at the stranger I had once loved, it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like the end. Jessica signed the divorce papers. Her lawyer, seeing the mountain of evidence against them, advised her to take the deal. There was no fight left in her. The day she moved her things out of the house was quiet and gray, matching the mood. I stayed with my parents and the kids, giving her the space to pack up the remnants of her life with me. I didn't want to see her. I didn't need any more closure than her signature on the dotted line. When I finally returned home with Mia and Ben, the house felt cavernous and empty. The silence was the loudest thing in it. All the spaces Jessica used to occupy, her side of the bed, her chair at the dinner table, her corner of the couch, were now just vacant voids. For the first few weeks, we were like ghosts rattling around in a place that was no longer a home, but just a house full of memories, many of them now tainted. The kids felt it too. They were quieter, more subdued. Mia, ever the perceptive one, would get a sad look on her face whenever she walked past her mom's old office. Ben started having trouble sleeping at night, crawling into my bed, seeking a security that had been fractured. Rebuilding was a slow, deliberate process. It started with small things. The first weekend, we took down the generic, soulless art prints the stagers had put up, and we hung the kids' drawings back on the walls. We blasted music and ate. Add a pizza and ice cream picnic on the living room floor. We filled the house with our own noise, our own life, pushing out the silence. My parents were my rock. My mom would come over with casseroles and pies, filling the kitchen with warm smells and even warmer hugs. My dad helped me with the overgrown lawn and the long list of honeydew tasks that had been neglected. He'd work alongside me in comfortable silence, and then over a cold beer on the back porch, he'd just listen. He never told me what to do, but he let me know I wasn't alone. Leo was my other lifeline. He'd come over and we'd watch the game or just sit and talk. He'd been there from the moment I saw that listing, a witness to the entire collapse. He understood the betrayal in a way no one else could. He helped me navigate the complex emotions, the anger that still flared up at unexpected times, the deep, aching sadness, and the guilt I felt for what my children were going through, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. Slowly, brick by brick, we started to build a new foundation. We established new routines. Taco Tuesdays became a sacred tradition. Friday was movie night, complete with a fortress of pillows and blankets in the living room. Sunday mornings were for making a huge pancake breakfast together, with Mia in charge of stirring and Ben as the official chocolate chip dispenser. I had to learn to be two parents in one. I learned how to braid Mia's hair, watching online tutorials until my clumsy fingers finally got it right. I learned the names of all the characters in Ben's favorite cartoons. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every t-ball game, every school play. I was present in a way I'd never been before. My deployment had been cut short, and in a strange way, Jessica's betrayal had given me a gift, more time with my children when they needed me the most. Jessica saw the kids every other Saturday for a few hours at a supervised visitation center. The first few times were hard. The kids would come back upset and quiet. But as time went on, they grew more accustomed to the new reality. They saw her, but I was their home. I was their stability. Their love for her became a distant, abstract thing, while their life with me was real and tangible and safe. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Sarah Jenkins called me. She told me Jessica's ex-lawyer had contacted her. Jessica was in deep financial trouble and wanted to try and renegotiate the settlement. Sarah's response was swift and simple. I told him that if she so much as thought about taking you back to court, I would countersue for legal fees and bring up the fraud charges we initially agreed to hold in abeyance. We haven't heard from him since. That call was a final turning point. The threat was gone. She was truly out of our lives in any meaningful way. That evening, I was tucking Ben into bed. He looked up at me with his big, serious eyes. "Daddy, are you ever going away again?" he asked. I sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. I had submitted my papers to leave the army. My time as a soldier was over. My fight was here now. As I walked out of his room, I looked around the house. The light from the hallway spilled into the living room, illuminating the new photos on the mantel. There was one of me and the kids at the beach, covered in sand and grinning. There was one of the three of us with my parents, everyone laughing. There was no longer a void. The empty spaces had been filled. The foundation of my old life had been built on a trust that turned out to be an illusion. It had crumbled, and the collapse was violent and devastating. But in the rubble, with my children by my side, I had found something stronger to build on, a foundation of resilience, of a father's unwavering love, and the quiet, unshakable truth that home isn't just a place you own. It's a place you fight for, a place you rebuild, and a place you never, ever leave undefended.